So you should have a basic design for your web service. And the important thing is this module is more concerned about the understanding of the web services and the concepts and using them than it is with the programming side. So I'm more worried about you building an effective web service than I am about your skills in programming. So don't worry too much if you haven't got huge amounts of experience. There's so much documentation for PHP on the web, it's untrue. So don't worry too much. Now today we're going to start off with a blank creative account. So I set one up last night. We're going to cover pulling the data out of the database. We're going to cover pulling it into your PHP scripts. We're going to cover sending it out as JSON data. A few things. The creative accounts. You should all have a creative account. If you haven't got one, quick show of hands who hasn't got an account set up on the system. Okay. Matthew, if you go onto Moodle, I'll put a link on there where you can put your details in and I'll set you an account up overnight. Now there's one nasty thing I'm going to tell you about today. Okay, we're going to do everything from Secure Shell. So we're going to do everything using PuTTY Secure Shell, the whole process. Because if you can do it this way, you'll be able to do it anyway. So let's have a, you are still there? I'm going to drop it down a bit. So let's make a start. Make sure I don't miss anything out. So if you're on Windows, you're going to use PuTTY. I'm going to use Terminal because I'm on a non-Windows computer. And let's okay, how's that looking? Good. Right, so I'm going to set off okay, and I'm going to record this so you can play it back afterwards. So if you get stuck, you'll be able to refer back to this. So let's look at how we connect. So okay, take a few moments. Okay, I'm now onto the creative server. So what I'm going to do is I've got to, first of all, if I list the contents of the directory, there's absolutely nothing at all. Your directory is completely empty. There's no files. And the problem is, at the moment, there's no folder for the web server. So we have to create a folder called public_HTML. So mkdir for make a directory, public_HTML. And there it is. CD to navigate to it, and you don't need to type everything in. If you start typing and press tab, it will complete for you. I'm going to create a bookshop web service, so I'll create a new folder called bookshop. And it's a good idea, if you're going to be developing it over a period of time, to create a folder for each version. So I'm on version 1.0, my first version, so I'll create a folder called v1.0. And if I type in pwd, print working directory, you can see I'm in public HTML, bookshop version 1.0. There's my current folder. That's where I am on the system. So what I'm going to show you on this one, to navigate up a directory, it's cd ... So now I'm in bookshop, and to go through the history, my old commands, I press the up arrow. And now in public HTML bookshop. So if I can even go through history to 1.0, pwd, and there we are. So I'm now ready to install CodeIgniter. Now I've got to get CodeIgniter onto this server without using FTP. Okay? Think about it. I'm not going to use anything apart from this. How do I get the installation files onto the server without using FTP? Any ideas? You could get pull. Use Git and pull. I could use Git and pull. Sadly, I haven't installed Git either. I haven't installed Git client, but good idea. I'm going to use a special command called wget. And I type in the address of the file I want. I put it in my own personal space. and you can use it. I'll keep this one for you. CodeIgniter.zip. Done. 2 meg, 2.3 meg. You can see the progress bar here. It was so quick you didn't see it happen. Look. And now if I ls in here, there's my zip file. There's my installation files. So really quick. So I'm going to unzip this. It's unzipped. ls again, and there's my files there. So I can remove rm CodeIgniter.zip, and there's my folders. I've got 2 files, license.txt, index.php, and I've got 3 folders, application, system and user guide. So I'm now ready to go. So let's have a look at the structure of it. There's a special command called tree. If I press tree, it gives me the entire folder structure from where I currently am at the moment, which is a bit much. So I'm going to say tree, put an L flag in, 2, so I get 2 levels. And that gives me 2 levels of the structure. So you can see in the application I've got some folders: controllers, config, models, views. This should sound familiar, shouldn't it? Who's on the 387com module? Who's in 387com? Does this sound familiar? We've got models, we've got views, and we've got controllers. Okay? It's all over again. It's flashback time. In the system, I've got all the core libraries, and the user guide, I've got all the full documentation in there. So everything's there ready to go. So I can now test this. Oops, wrong way. So let's go back. Let's fire up a web browser, and let's so I've installed it. I've gone to the folder where I had my I put my installation files, and it's working. Look, there's my CodeIgniter setup installed. So let's see if I can get a web service working. Index.php /test /simple test. There we got it. There we are. We now have a working web service. I'm going to dangle dice with death and try and improve the resolution of the screen a bit so we can get things on. If it goes blank, scream. 800.102.4.768. Dare we risk 102.4.768? Ooh, 1280. Yes, we'll keep that one. So now let's have a look at, let's use, just copy that one and use API-G. Remember the tool we used for Bookshop? Because we should be able to test our systems with that. So if I paste that in, simple test. There's my request, get HTTP 1.1, and there's my response. Okay, cheers, thank you. So I now have a very simple web service set up. There's no database at the moment. So for example, if I go to books, I'll get an internal error, database error. Can you see that? I've got a database error here because I haven't configured the database yet. So I've now got to go back and I've got to modify some of the files. So cd application, cd application. I've got some important folders here. The config folder is really important. That's my configuration files. I'm going to mess with those now. And then the controllers file, that's where I'm going to have my controllers that generate the web service. I'm not worried about views because there is no view, is there? It's just JSON data. And I'm not worried about the models because it's not complicated enough for that yet. So cd config, let's have a list format. And you can see I've got 2 files, config.php and I've got database.php. So the editor is called nano config.php, and here's my configuration file. There's one line of code I need to change. The base URL of my web service. So can you see I've started it for you, I've built the basics for you. So my web service is going to be tilde test user, which is my username account. So my username. So yours will be that number, won't it? Your enrollment number. /bookshop /version 1.0. Okay, does that make sense? I don't put the public HTML folder in because that is the website. That's my root folder for my website. That doesn't count. Control O to save, and that's now saved. Control X, and then back to my list. So now I'm going to edit the database.php file. And all I've got to do on this one is put my database credentials in. So scroll down a bit more. Here we are. Local host, that's fine. The username is my, yours is CU, isn't it? CU, then your student number. Mine's test user. Password is going to be password because so I can remember it for this session. The database is the same as your username. That makes sense. So if your username is CU12345667, your database is also CU12345667. Okay, easy to remember that. So I've done that. I've made the settings. Control O. The commands are at the bottom here. O is write out. Control X takes me back. So I've now configured my database. What I need to do now, I need to create a database table, don't I, with some data in it. So I'm going to log into MySQL, I'm going to create a table, I'm going to import some data into the table, and then I'm going to test my web service. Then I'm going to open up the controller and show you how the controller works. Right? That's what I'm hoping to get done today. So, to get back to your home folder, by the way, cd tilde. That takes me back to my home folder. So if I do ls now, I'm back to my root folder. So let's see if we can do this. MySQL -u test user. There's my username. The -p means there's going to be a password. And then I put my database name at the end, which is the same as my username. So it's going to connect me using the test user login, and it's going to automatically connect me to the right database, because each of you has a different database, so you can build your own tables. Oops. Type my password in, and I'm in. So from this point onwards, it's only using SQL. Okay, there's nothing else to do. So if I type in show tables, there are no tables because I haven't built any yet. So I'm now going to build my first database table. So you'll have to remember SQL. You can type it all into a notepad or something, then copy and paste it in here if you want to. But I'm going to just do it directly. Trait table books. And you can do multiple lines. Just keep pressing enter. Okay. The semicolon is the end of the SQL. ID integer primary key auto increment, which basically means it's the primary key of the table and it will automatically generate an ID for you for each field, comma, title, which is a varchar. I have 64 characters, should be enough for that, and author, varchar 64. So I've now got, and then I'll close the bracket, semicolon, and we now have a database table. So show tables, in fact up arrow works here as well. I've now got a books table. Describe books, shows me my fields, my data types, and so on. So I now have a books table. So now our next job is to import some data into the books table. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to exit MySQL. So I'm back in my root folder. I'm going to create a simple CSV file. And we're going to do, it was ID, wasn't it? Then it was title, What should we do? And then it was the author. Thank you. New line. And so a third one. Oops. Okay, so I've now got 3 records, 3 books I can import. So save it, Control O, exit, Control X, and if I ls now, you can see there's my books.csv file. So I'm now going to connect to the database, and I'm going to import the data from the CSV file. So it's important that when you connect to the database, you're in the folder with the data in before you connect to the database. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. In fact, I don't even need to do this. Look. And let's load the data. So, load data, local, in file, books.csv, into table, books, wasn't it? Books. Then it was fields terminated by commas, and it was lines terminated by, and it was the new line character. So every line is terminated with a new line character. Every field has a comma separating it. So if I press semicolon, what have I done wrong? Fields, error, because one of those versions in the books.csv. Ah, I can see it's a string. I need to put quotes around it. So let's do that. So put quotes around that. Records 3, that's good. Deleted 0, skipped 0, warning 0. So now if I select star from books, there's my data in the database. Okay, so it's actually quite quick working through Secure Shell. Let's return to my web service console. What we got? No code at all. We've got all our books. So let's choose book 2. No. What's the error message? Unknown column code. Okay. So let's go back to my my code again. Right. So MySQL. Exit MySQL. And cd public HTML bookshop version 1.0 application controllers so let's just go back in. So if I put working directory, you can see I'm in public HTML bookshop version 1 application controllers. Okay, so I've navigated through to that folder. So if I ls in there, I've got a file called test.php, and there's my code. That's what I'm dealing with. So I'm going to just quickly change a line, and I'll go back to this in a minute and show you what's going on. Select star from books where ID, that's more like it, isn't it? Control O. There we are. I've now got pulling my book off. So I've shown you how to install CodeIgniter. I've shown you how to create database tables, import data into database tables, and we're going to have a look at the code now. So here is my code. So let's have a look. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to load it into a different program. A little tip I'm going to show you, top tip for the day, is I'm going to use CodeIgniter, and I'm going to load the file remotely into my editor. So Komodo preferences, servers, let me just, good, it's not there, right. So I'm going to create a new remote account. I'm going to choose Secure FTP. I'm going to call it Bookshop. The host is creative.coventry.ac.uk. Port it can work out. Username is test user. Password, right. Add. What I've done, CodeIgniter has a built-in FTP client. So you can connect to files without having to use FTP programs at all. So I click on OK, and I'm going to open that file. File, open remote file. The server is Bookshop. I've already got Bookshop, I use my new version. And you wait a few seconds for it to connect. There's my public HTML folder, Bookshop, version 1, application, controllers, test.php. So I can open this file directly from the editor of the server. Can everyone see that? Clear? So let's have a look at some of this code. Right, the first thing is, it's using a special library called rest_controller.php. That's the parent class. This is a class. I've got a class called test, which extends this, so I'm creating a subclass of REST controller. Now that class test is that test there. So after the index.php, that next bit of the path is my class name. Right, that's the really important bit. Now the difference is the class name is capitalized here because it's a class, but when you put it in the URL, you don't capitalize. So I've got a lowercase test there, right? Making sense? Now I've got this next bit, which is book. Book is the name of the function, the name of the method, just there. Now it's called book_get. Why? It uses the get method. So I can have another function called book_post, book_put, book_delete. So I can create a function for each of my methods, and it will call the one based on what method you chose. So for example, if I go back and I choose post, and I click on send, I get a 404 not found error automatically, unknown method. Makes sense, doesn't it? Because I haven't got a post yet. So is this starting to make a little bit of sense now? So my simple test is there, look. When I said /test/simple test, I was going to the test class and running a method called simple test. Now, remember book get, the book one, I had test, which was the name of my class, I had book, which is the name of my method, and I had this extra parameter at the end. That's simply a parameter in my method. So it simply reads that in as book ID and uses it in my database query. Okay? Can you see why I've chosen CodeIgniter? It couldn't get much easier than this to build yourself a web service. Your hard bit is going to be figuring out how to build the interface and how to build the web service structure so it makes sense. And that's what I want you to really focus on. So let's have a look at the rest of the code. The simplest one here, I create a dictionary, okay, data name, data university, okay, that's creating the dictionary in PHP, and in the response, I pass the dictionary, and I pass, what's that 200 mean? Success, that's my success code. So I pass the code to correspond to whether it's success or failure. So on this one, it's slightly more complicated, but not much. This loads the database libraries. so I can work with my database, establish the connection to my database. Then I have my SQL query. Of course, you would never have select star, would you? Yeah, because that's just bad code. That's bad, bad practice. Select star from books. Oh, look, there's a semicolon there and there's a semicolon there because one's for the SQL statement and one's for the PHP. You see, there's a double two semicolons. Dollar query equals this DB query. You pass the SQL statement in. Dollar data equals query result, and that does all the work for you. The results, if you've got more than one record, it returns an array of dictionaries, which is how you ended up with post would be a bad idea, and that's how you ended up with this array containing 3 dictionaries. So you haven't got to build it yourself, you just have to tell it what you want. So response data 200. So is it making sense so far? Is it making sense so far? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to do content negotiation using books_get. So what I'm going to do, I'm in my header, there, I'm going to have a parameter called content, and I'll put a value of summary in there. So I'm telling, so my client is telling the server, I just want a quick summary. So if I just want a summary, I'll just return the book titles. If I don't put that in, I want to return all the book details. Does that make sense? So before I do that, I better put some code in, I suppose, haven't I, to get this to work. Books_get, right. So let's pull off the, we need to load the database anyway. And it's going to be Apache request headers. So I'm now pulling off all the header information that was sent through. That's both the head and the body stuff. So I want to have dollar content equals dollar headers, and it's an array. What did I call that one? Content. Okay, so I've now got my content. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an if statement in. Is equal to I said summary, didn't I? Is equal to summary, else we'll do something else. Right. So if it's summary, I don't want it all, do I? If not, I want the so let's just have a go at this. Select title from books. So if I've requested a summary, I want the titles, don't I? So my query is going to be pull the titles out. If I haven't said summary, I want all the data, so it should send me all the data. Okay, this has been a live test, see if it works. So this is books. And now I've got the titles. You see? So if I go into my header and I remove that and I send, oops. Ah, right. Because it doesn't exist, I've got to put something else in. If is set right. This is really useful command, by the way. The is set command says does it exist. So if it's set Okay, dollar, I'll use a flag idea. Dollar content equals blank. So setting dollar content to blank. If the headers is set to something else, I set it to that value. I could just put it in the if statement. It would be probably easier that way. So let's see if that works. So there you see, if I don't specify the content, I get one sort of content. If I put a content negotiation header in, I can get something different out of the system. So if people are just learning how to use this, they always get the same information, but the more power users can specify exactly what data they want. So it's the same URI, isn't it? I'm using get, the same method, but I'm getting different data back based on my content negotiation header. Okay, so that's for the more advanced. You don't need to do this. This is just, if you want to go for the higher grade stuff on this one, you want to put content negotiation in. The next time we'll see the headers is not next week, it's the week after, and we're going to put an authentication header in here as well. So we can put authentication data in for simple HTTP and digest authentication. So is this making some sense now? Can you see how this is working? Right, should we do a bad response? Yeah, we've done 200 so far, haven't we? Should we finish off with a bad response? This looks good, doesn't it? What happens if I forget to put the ID parameter in? Book/3 should work, shouldn't it? Book/nothing. Bang, I've got an error. What I need to do is suppress the error, get rid of this nasty HTML error, and respond with my own custom error, don't I? So it's a bit more web service friendly. So with a parameter, you can set a default value. That's useful to know. So if the parameter isn't there, it will assign it as null, which means I can now do a test, an if statement, can't I, to see if it's null. So if dollar book underscore ID is equal to null, then we need to do something else, don't we? We don't want a good response. Dollar data equals missing parameter, and then we're going to respond this response dollar data parameter be 400. Some would argue 422, but I'm saying 400. So let's have a look. So if the parameter is missing, we should get a proper error message now. And there's a missing parameter. You see it's worked? If I want more detail, I can create a dictionary for this, couldn't I? I could say dollar data error equals missing parameter, and dollar data code equals 42. And then if I do that one, I get a dictionary with my error code and my error messaging. So hopefully what I've shown you today has been enough to get you started on using CodeIgniter. The biggest challenge for you is not the code. The biggest challenge for you is translating your vision of a web service into a reality. So we're going to do this in 3 stages. The lab for this week is install CodeIgniter. That's 10 minutes, that's easy. Build your database tables and import some data so we can use it. And build the gets. Okay, so you're going to have just the get methods in your web service so far. Next week, I'm going to do another demo, hopefully if it all works. And I'm going to show you put, post, and delete, how to implement those using CodeIgniter. And then your lab for next week is going to be implementing your put, post, and delete. You've got a nice web service by this point, but there is no authentication at all. Anyone can mess with it. So the following session, it'll be half presentation and half demo. The presentation is about simple HTTP authentication and digest authentication. I will then sit down and run you through the process of implementing that in CodeIgniter. The 6th session before the hand-in date is going to be token-based authentication and OAuth. You don't need that unless you're going for all the high grades. If you really want to go for the high grades, you can implement the token-based as well. The OAuth is beyond the scope of this module. It's just too much to get your head around.